A provisional cast on creates a live edge of stitches that you can do so many things with. So we're going to learn how to do 4 different ways so that you can find the best method for you and your project. This first type of cast on, I believe, is the best known. It is a single needle provisional cast on with a crochet hook and waste yarn. Now for this cast on, you don't need to actually cut the waste yarn ahead of time, but if you need to know for sure, you will want to leave about 4.5 times the length of your cast on edge. So you're going to begin with a slip knot, which you place on your crochet hook. Your crochet hook is going to be in your right hand. Your working yarn and your needle are going to be in your left hand. Even if you are an English knitter, I recommend this way of holding the yarn for this cast on. It's just going to make your life a lot easier. So you begin with the yarn in the back behind the needle and forming an X with your crochet hook and your knitting needle with the crochet hook on top. Now it doesn't matter what size this crochet hook is because the gauge of the stitches is determined by your needle. So you're going to wrap the yarn around the crochet hook from bottom to top, and then you're going to pull that. It's easier if you turn the crochet hook head so that it points down towards the knot or towards the V, and then pull that yarn through. This creates a chain, a crochet chain, and it also forms your first stitch on your needle. Now you reset that yarn to the back, cross again, and pull that yarn, that working yarn, through the loop on the crochet hook. And you continue to do this for the number of stitches that you need to cast on. Now with this specific provisional cast on, you're not actually working any stitches of the project. So depending on your pattern, you may need to knit your first row or round as part of the cast on. With the other 3 cast-ons, provisional cast-ons that I'm going to show you, those will work the first and with that final one, even the second row. So once you hit the end or have cast on the number of stitches that you need, you have 2 options. You can just pull this final, you can clip the yarn and pull the final end through, or you can use a handy little interlocking stitch marker here to put it through the loop to hold it open. And then once you have knit all the rows or rounds that you need to do, you just take this out, you take this out, and as you unravel, you will put the stitches that are formed here on top back onto another needle, and this will just pull out very easily. This second type of provisional cast on was completely new to me. It requires a single set of needles, your gauge needles, your working yarn, as well as a cut piece of scrap yarn. Now you want a piece of scrap yarn that's a little longer than the edge that you are planning to cast on. You'll begin with your working yarn, your project yarn, and you'll make a slip knot about 6 to 8 inches in. You just want enough to comfortably weave in ends. You will put that on your needle, and you'll be holding that needle in your right hand. You will then place your scrap yarn between between the legs of your tail and your working yarn, so that this yarn is to the back of your working yarn, and you're going to be set up like this, that you're holding these 2 tails in your right hand, and you're holding the working yarn and the working yarn, or the scrap yarn working side in your left hand. you're gonna, with your working yarn, you're gonna go under and around to the back of that scrap yarn, over the top of that right hand needle, and pull it tight. You're gonna then reset so that that working yarn is in the front of your scrap yarn again. And once again, you're gonna go behind and around, and then over the top of your needle. You'll just continue to do this for the number of stitches that you need to cast on. As you go, you'll find that your tail gets kind of twisted along, your scrap yarn gets twisted along, so you just want to pull that free every few stitches to make sure you don't end up with a giant tangled mess. That's why I kind of think this one is a little bit better suited towards smaller sections that you might need a provisional cast on for. You'll just keep going. You're basically just wrapping this working yarn around these needles, but in doing so you're also twisting it around the waste yarn. And then once you're finished, you want to make sure that that is kind of locked down and around the working yarn. And then to secure it, you'll put a slip knot or something else in the working yarn or in the scrap yarn, just to make sure it's kind of not going anywhere. And when you get to the end, when you are ready to put those provisional cast-ons back on the needle, all you have to do for this one is just pull it free. And it slides right out. And boom, your stitches are ready to go back on your needles. This third cast on was also new to me. You need your working needle, your working yarn, as well as a spare interchangeable cord with stoppers if you have it. If you don't, you can also use a spare set of knitting needles, preferably in a smaller size, just to make it easier on down the road. But the reason why I recommend this is so you don't stab yourself as you're trying to cast this on, as I tend to do. So let's get started. You begin with about 6 to 8 inches at the end of your yarn. You cast on a slip knot, or not cast on, you make a slip knot. And you just slide that over the top of your stopper and onto your cord. Now you want to tighten it up so that it's not super big and loose, but not so tight that you can't get it over a pair of needles later. You'll then keep your tail in your right hand and, it's getting away from me, place your needle in your right hand as well. Now, if you are casting on an odd number of stitches, you'll begin with a yarn over. If you're casting on an even number of stitches, you will just dive right in to the cast on motion. So what you do is you go under and around the back of your cord, pick up the yarn and pull it over and around to the front. Then you will yarn over. You want to hold that yarn over in place with your right pointer finger and do the motion again, under and around to pick up the yarn and back around to the front and top, yarn over, hold that next yarn over in place, under and around, pick it up, yarn over, hold in place. You want to keep the cord and the stitches up nice and tight next to each other so that you don't end up with a big sloppy line. But I love this because it's really easy and fast. That motion you can just really get into. And then you end with your provisional stitches already on a cord, which I love. Then all you gotta do is pop on a pair of needles when you're ready to do whatever you're gonna do with this awesome cast on. Now, the one thing that you will need is to immediately start knitting, because otherwise this is just hanging around. So either turn it and start to knit your row, or if you cast on enough stitches, you'll be able to you'll start knitting all the way from down here. And yeah, that's how you do the third one. This last provisional cast on uses 2 needles with the same gauge. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have 2 needles in the same gauge, so I actually just screw the set of needle heads into 2 different cords. And you'll need a slip knot in the middle of your cast on. So you're going to want about 2 to 3 times, probably 3 times the amount of your cast on edge. So this slip knot is going to go on the bottom. Your tail is going to go also on the bottom, and your working yarn on top. Now this is going to look familiar because it is in fact Judy's Magic Cast On. This provisional cast on will cast on both the first and the second row of your project. So you have it set here, and then you will take your set of needles up above that top yarn, and you'll wrap from bottom to top. So you're always moving the yarn towards the center. And then to put on a stitch on top, you go around the yarn from top to bottom, always in towards the center. So we'll do that a couple more times. Around the top yarn, keep sliding that yarn into the center, around the bottom yarn, sliding that yarn into the center. Now this will cast on your provisional stitches backwards. So you will need to be aware of that if you are working Kitchener or something like that. Those stitches will be backwards. That may or may not matter depending on your cast on, or depending on how you are finishing it. So I love this because it's another quick way. Once you're done, you just want to be sure at the back you've got those the yarn tail and the working yarn twisted to lock that tail in place. And then you'll just slide this bottom one out. It can be hanging out. You can put it on some stitch, little hand-to-stitch markers or whatever you've got. And then when you are ready to finish your knit, those stitches are already on a cord and ready to go. Knitting a cowl in the round that you want to be able to do an invisible Kitchener seam later on so that you don't know where it begins and ends. It could be for if you're knitting a children's sweater like Iridium here. I created a provisional cast on here at the edge so that at any point when my kid grows, because he certainly will, I can tear out this seam or this ribbing here and just go and add more length, because that's where my kids tend to grow out of their clothes first. Or like for the beautiful falling up sweater here, I used it to be able to create a hem, which just lets that color work melt off the edge, which is super fun. So those are a few of the many reasons why